You do things for your neighbor, love thy neighbor, and so on. And Adam Smith said that doesn't happen in real life, right? People love themselves, and because everyone loves themselves and acts in self-interest, there is a kind of a social harmony working as if by a hidden hand, the famous hidden hand statement. Okay, so this is where I'm kind of going with it from that Alexis de Tocqueville statement about where we think peace obtains because of self-interested behavior, right? Okay, so these are sort of large ideas. Now, there's a lot of work that has been done on the liberal peace and the capitalist peace idea, and perhaps Michael will talk more about that. But I want to get into why I think free markets cause peace. One is that it's informed by a lot of recent research on civil war, which is, by the way, the most prevalent form of violence, but also on a radical decline. Apparently there is something like a 70% drop since the early 1990s in the incidence of civil conflict. This is the most prevalent form of violence globally, but even that is on a very steep decline. And the answer is that civil conflicts are rarely caused by matters of the heart, and that calculations about civil war, even civil war that looks anarchical and totally chaotic, is that they are very well calculated. Why? Because civil war is also costly, and somebody has to invest in the fighting over some other outcome, negotiation, for example. And so if somebody is making that investment in costly war, to give you an example, the Naxal movement in India, which is spreading through all the states very rapidly, apparently spends about 2 billion Indian rupees a year buying arms. So this is not a cheap fight. It's a very expensive fight. 2 billion Indian rupees is a lot of land for poor peasants. It's a lot of food for hungry people, a lot of schooling for unschooled people, for illiterates and so on. So if somebody is making this decision to engage in this costly behavior, the answer is that civil conflict has something to do with opportunistic behavior rather than some kind of public goods provision. What do I mean by that big social science work? A public good is something by which everyone benefits. That's something that's non-excludable. To give you an example, the purest form of a public good is something like clean air, right? If I breathe clean air, it doesn't take away from you. And so, if a public good is being provided, and justice is a public good, that is, if I am a martyr who goes out there, makes my 2 billion Indian rupees a year fight, and I bring justice to everybody, everybody can engage it. Everybody can enjoy it. And so we think, this is this logic of collective action, some of you may know this, is that if a public good is being provided, then somebody bears the cost of providing that public good. So each individual's rational behavior should be to free ride. That is, why should I bear the $2 billion Indian rupee cost of bringing justice to people if I could free ride and enjoy that justice after the martyr has gone and got himself killed and brought me justice, right? So each individual should free ride if a public good is being provided, but this gives us a clue as to why then is conflict opportunistic behavior. The payoff to organizing that costly conflict must come from something. That is, there must be a payoff to that investment, and this is what we find in people who have sort of tried to address this behavior, address civil conflict, by looking at whether or not grievance-causing factors are more likely to cause conflict than more opportunistic factors, right? So the opportunity to rebel tends to explain conflict more often than does the motivation to rebel. We all want to rob the Bank of Norway, but only some people can do it, right? That is well-placed people. governments, for example. No, I'm just kidding. So the way in which I come to this is, what are the opportunities in free market environments or non-free market environments that provide the payoff to organizing costly behavior? The answer is that, in a very simple sense, and we can debate this, is that in rich countries, civil war is simply crime. Opportunistic actors organize crime in order to get a payoff to their organization, and they survive because they have some organizational advantages, right? Motorcycle gangs, other people engaged in, you can think of northern Mexico where people, 3,000 deaths have happened last year. It's more than Palestine, the Palestinian conflict. 3,000 deaths over the drugs trade, right? So there is a payoff to organization. People invest in organizing this violent behavior and avoid very well organized state forces in order to do that, but the payoff is large, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that in autarkic economies, and most poor country economies are autarkic in the sense that even if you have the veneer of capitalism, the infrastructure of capitalism is missing. There are economies that are characterized by mercantilistic practices. It is people who control the state tend to control the economies. We call that rent seeking. That is, rent seeking is another social sciencey word for simply saying people who will use political power to get something from the market which they otherwise would not get, right? So producers who are well organized, that have a lot to lose, will tend to lobby governments for tariffs and at the expense of consumers. Why? Because a few well-organized people who lose big are able to overcome their collective action problems for organizing in order to raise tariffs, for example. That's called rent seeking. So they get a rent that the market will not provide above that if they organize politically, right? So farmers who are well organized, who will lose big, will seek rents off of consumers who are not well organized and hard to organize, because each of us as consumers only lose a very small. So what? The price of potatoes went up to krona. We don't care, right? It's not worth my time to try to organize against it. So few people who are well organized, who lose big or gain big, can organize better than many with diffuse losses. And as consumers, we will have diffuse losses. Okay, so in autarkic environments, like most poor countries, which have mercantilistic practices, where property rights are insecure, if I start a business and I'm suddenly doing well, I get taxed, or the president's brother comes and takes my stuff, right? They do it usually with a veneer of legalism. Sometimes they call it elections, but that's what happens. I lose my stuff. So Africans, who are very entrepreneurial, by the way, tend to invest their money abroad more than they invest at home. Why? And in these environments, what happens is that the payoffs to organizing in the shadows are always quite good. So in your handout, you have a UN estimate of corruption in Afghanistan. The highest bribes, which is half of per capita income, is paid to customs officials, right? So your average TV is now costing you the price of the TV and half your per capita annual average income on top. Organizing TV smuggling would be a fantastic endeavor if you were trying to evade state customs officials and bring TVs into the market in Afghanistan. And once you do that, you simply create an infrastructure of violence. For me, what motivates